Hi, I'm Tina.
And I'm Rich.
If there's one thing we've learned in over 20 years of marriage,
It's that some days you'll feel like killing your wife.
and some days you'll feel like killing your husband.
Welcome to Love, Marry, Kill.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Tina.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm a woman in December, so I am frazzled. There's a lot going on.
Oh, there
There's
is.
a lot
I
going
know
on.
you have a lot to do, and I appreciate
Well, you have a lot
everything.
to do too. I mean, you're just as busy.
Yeah, but I think being a woman in December is maybe a little more stressful for most women.
I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. So it is freezing here in Michigan, like literally
It is
freezing.
bitter
We've got
cold.
snow on the ground, which is kind of unusual for this time of year. I
Yeah.
think our last couple of Christmases have been green.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere.
Do you want to tell everyone what you got for your birthday?
I got something very exciting.
You did?
And just in the nick of time,
Mhm.
I got a snowblower.
Well, you got the snowblower because we saw like 8
Right.
inches snow coming and
We did. I've held off for years. I actually
we
don't
have, yeah.
mind shoveling snow that much.
But now that you've had another birthday and
our
you're
kids are not
very
around
old.
as much. Yes, it's that.
I mean, it was time for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of big. And my caveat to you was we should absolutely get it, but it has to neatly fit in our garage. And
Yeah.
so far
it
I'm
fits
not
perfectly.
super happy with the location.
Fits neatly right in the
I
middle.
love a clear path to my car. I love it so much.
yeah.
And that, so
Yeah,
we're going to
figure-
work on that.
We'll
We're
figure
going to
something
put a
out.
pin in that and we're going to circle back in the new year
Fair.
and find a new place for that snowblower. But
Sure.
I'm really glad that you got it.
Yeah, me too. Worked really well.
So it's been a while since we recorded, like maybe 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think it was our last episode. You gave some sports predictions, and some of our listeners went with your bets.
Did they?
They
went
lost
to,
a lot of money on your bets. So what do you have to say for
I
yourself?
don't want to talk about it. I was so far off on everything.
Yeah.
It was, I think I read a comment. Somebody said it was like the worst weekend in Detroit sports history.
I don't think it really was, but
It was pretty bad. And I
Yeah.
don't even really follow the Red Wings and the Pistons that closely, but
but the
all
Lions
across
have
the board.
since won.
Lions won. Yeah.
They won their last 2 games.
No, they won Thursday. They lost
Sorry, I don't
last
really keep
Thursday was
track.
Thanksgiving. They're still in the playoff hunt, but it's not looking great.
Now,
And
who's at the top of the playoff hunt?
I have no idea. I really haven't followed it.
You liar. You know. You just don't want to say it. Say it. Be a man. Be a real man. You can do it.
The Chicago Bears.
Yeah. Chicago Bears. Go Bears. The Bears. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exciting to be a Bear fan, even though I don't really care, but it's
Well,
just
it's
nice.
to root for your hometown team.
Yeah. Well, brace yourself because I have a compliment to give you.
All right, I will brace
One of
myself.
your strengths is while you're watching the game, you can get really kind of grumpy, but you always shake it off very quickly, which I appreciate because I know some people go into Monday morning or whatever the day,
Yeah.
and they carry it with them, but you
I
are.
like to
good
think
sport.
that I've
Mhm.
matured a little bit over the years, just a
I
little.
think you've always been like that.
Sometimes it's been worse than others, but I do shake it off pretty
Okay,
quick,
well,
and I
just-
even try not to get too upset during the game when things are happening. But sometimes I can't help
Well, I
myself.
don't really watch the games with you, so I don't really know.
Yeah.
But when I see you, when you come up for a snack,
Thursday night, I was watching the game, and I started to wonder if maybe you were hearing me from two. I was in the basement watching the game, and you
Yeah.
were on
I
our
was
second
upstairs,
floor,
yeah.
and I wouldn't have been surprised if you heard me a couple of times.
well, sometimes you just send me a text and you're like, I can't believe this call or blah, blah, blah. It was the worst call in NFL history, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of controversy,
Oh yeah, we generated a little bit of controversy on our last episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was the Carmela and David Knight episode.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, I gave you a quiz
Mm-hmm.
that I came up with about ethical policing.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, what I tried to do is give you some situations that were really difficult situations
Right.
if you were, and they were hypothetical situations. And a few people commented saying that they felt like we were excusing,
we were being cotton-headed ninny muggins.
yeah, that we were excusing police brutality, and we really feel bad about that because we don't condone police
No, of
brutality
course not.
at all. But I do think there are situations that police get in that are really difficult. Provide some ethical.
I think that was our point.
Yeah, exactly. These were not meant to be like easy, answers to these. We have a lot of respect for law enforcement. There are definitely bad cops, but the vast majority of them are good cops.
Hmm.
They're trying to do the right thing all the time. And we apologize if it came off sounding like we were condoning police brutality, because
Yeah,
that's certainly not what we meant.
absolutely. I did post an apology on social media, and a lot of you voiced your support for us and said, even if you say something stupid every episode, we still love you and support you. And we really do appreciate that.
Yeah, we do.
I did bring you a snack.
I was hoping.
We're going to South Africa today, where we've never been. You would think that I would have made you something elaborate, but I ran out of time as usual. But I made you popcorn with a South African twist.
Oh, interesting.
Just made it the regular way. Actually, you were so nice and made it for me so I could take a shower. But it's popcorn with paprika and garlic powder and salt and sugar and a little bit of cayenne pepper.
Oh, cool.
I think it's pretty yummy.
All right. I'm looking
Do you wanna
forward to
try
trying
it?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you like the popcorn?
I did. I have to say I was a little skeptical because I don't normally like popcorn with that type of
Yeah.
spice on it. But yeah, it was really tasty.
I think it's really good. And I can't really give you a recipe because I just kind of
You just
threw
winged
a
it?
little bit of this and a little bit of that. But it's supposed to be most heavily spiced with paprika. So it's like a teaspoon of paprika, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. I think I put a teaspoon of salt and just a large pinch of cayenne. But
Cool.
you can make it to your own specifications.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome. We don't talk about what cases we're doing to each other, but it was a coincidence that you are also working on a South Africa case.
I am.
And I feel a little guilty about my easy snack. So if you want, I will take one of your snacks
Oh,
for your South African recipes.
I won't turn that down.
Okay. So we will come back to South Africa in just a couple of weeks.
Yep.
It's a beautiful country that's been through a lot, and I'm looking forward to telling you about this case. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Anni Hindocha and Shrien Dewani, and I wanted to thank Natasha, who is from South Africa, for recommending this case. And Natasha and I emailed a few times back and forth, and she gave me some really good insight into her country. Sometimes it's hard for us to really get to the nugget of a country when we're researching.
Yeah,
And
I think in the
sometimes-
States, we kind of know most of the regions of the United States to some degree, but when it comes to a country that we've never been to, it is difficult.
It can be hard to really glean, what a country is about. But before we get into the case, I did want to mention that our merch store is open again. If you go to bonfire.com/store/love-mary-kill-store, this link will be in our show notes. It'll be open until December 22nd, which is a short window, but it will reopen again after that. I guess they batch print. And we didn't realize, actually, that our store has been open this whole time because we're not really good.
Just not very detail-oriented on some things.
Right. So anyway, if you're interested, please go there. And we have some mugs, and we have sweatshirts and T-shirts, and we wear ours all the time. And I think they're pretty cute.
They are. They're nice.
I want to apologize in advance for butchering all of the names and places that we are about to talk about.
I would also like to apologize for that.
On Saturday night, November 13th, 2010, in the township of Khayelitsha on the southeastern outskirts of Cape Town, a poverty-stricken area considered dangerous after dark, a well-dressed Indian man, a foreign national, was seen nervously pacing outside a small house looking for help. He'd knocked on a few doors, but no one answered. "Excuse me, is there a nearby police station where I can report a carjacking?" he asked. The homeowner, Simbonila Motokazi, had just arrived home from driving a friend to the airport. Simbonila was happy to help. He called his cousin, a local police officer. Within minutes, they arrived on the scene, but the tourist appeared confused, disoriented, and unable to adequately describe what had happened that evening. He told police his name was Shrien Dewani. He was a 30-year-old businessman from Bristol, England, about 2.5 hours from London. Shrien and his wife of 3 weeks, Anni, had arrived in Cape Town the previous day for the second leg of their honeymoon, staying in the posh 500-pound per night waterfront hotel, Cape Grace. Earlier that evening, they'd embarked on a tour of Cape Town with a hired driver who took them through some of the more dangerous areas of the city's east side. According to Shrien, at about 10:45 p.m., while they were stopped at an intersection, Two armed men wearing wide-brimmed sun hats, despite it being dark, approached the vehicle and ousted the driver at gunpoint, forcing him into the back seat. They drove around for 45 minutes with the terrified newlyweds in the back seat, cowering in fear until they forced Shrien out of the vehicle, speeding off into the night, with Anni still in the back seat. Shrien couldn't tell police where they'd been driving, nor could he recall the make or model of the vehicle. Police returned Shrien to the hotel at 12:45 a.m. while they searched for Anni through the night. Desperate, Shrien called his family in Bristol, pleading for help. His brother, Prayan, immediately sent a photo of Anni to South African authorities and managed to obtain a backup of Shrien's BlackBerry, pulling the contact list, including the number of the taxi driver, Zola Tango. He even reached out to a private detective for help finding Anni, but they declined because the investigation was too fresh, and they said that they might get in the way of the police.
Prayan was really proactive on this.
Anni was loved by everyone, and at this point, everyone was devastated and wanted to do anything that they could to find her.
Yeah.
The next morning, a woman called police to report a suspicious gray minivan that had been parked across from her house next to a field all night. Curious residents had gathered around the vehicle and were peering through the windows. When police arrived, they found blood dripping from the van, pooling on the ground below. The doors were unlocked. A woman lay sprawled across the back seat. She was young, covered in blood, and tragically already dead. The victim was identified as 28-year-old newlywed Anni Hindocha. She had been shot once in the neck with a 9mm pistol, which was found on the floor of the van. A bloody fingerprint and thumbprint were found on the left fender of the van. The owner of the prints, 25-year-old Kolila Mingeni, was found and arrested not far from where the van had been discovered, at his grandmother's house. When officers arrived, he was fast asleep. He'd been out partying until the early morning hours and had brought 2 women and a man home with him. All 4 were asleep in his bed. Under the mattress, the police found a cell phone. Mingeni said it was the taxi driver's phone, Zola Tango. Anni's diamond bracelet was also in his possession. Police dragged him out of the house and placed him under arrest. He lied and said a man named Mawiwi was his accomplice, but that man had an alibi. Days later, he admitted to his lie and gave the name Maziwa Madota Lennox Kwabe to police.
So this new name that he gave to the police, he was saying that was someone who had been his accomplice?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maziwa Madota. Can you say that?
Maziwa Madota.
Very good. South Africa spans more than 1 million square kilometers, or about 470,000 square miles, making it nearly twice the size of Texas, with a population of roughly 65 million people. It's a country of striking contrasts, shaped by a long history, vast geography, and deep cultural diversity. Cape Town, home to about 5 million residents, sits on the southwestern tip of the country and serves as South Africa's legislative capital, where Parliament meets. Often described as one of the most beautiful cities in the world, it is framed by the flat-topped grandeur of Table Mountain and the Atlantic Ocean, and is known for its dramatic coastline, historic neighborhoods, and vibrant multicultural communities. Its modern landscape is still deeply shaped by the legacy of apartheid, the racial segregation system enforced from 1948 to 1994. Under apartheid, non-white residents were forcibly removed from central districts and pushed into outlying townships like Khayelitsha, creating stark racial and economic divides that remain visible today. Although apartheid ended with South Africa's first democratic elections in 1994, its influence continues to shape the patterns of wealth, opportunity, housing, and safety throughout the city. Since the end of apartheid in 1994, South Africa has worked to right the wrongs of its past by dismantling discriminatory laws, expanding political representation, and creating programs aimed at improving housing, education, and economic opportunity for communities long denied them. The progress has been uneven, but the country has made meaningful strides towards building a more inclusive and democratic society, an ongoing effort to repair the deep inequalities left behind and move toward a more just future. Today, Cape Town is a major tourism hub, drawing millions with attractions like Table Mountain, Robben Island, Camps Bay, and Cape Winelands. Tourism fuels a significant part of the local economy, even as the city continues to navigate deep inequalities and safety concerns that vary widely from one area to another. Despite these contrasts, Cape Town remains a vibrant cultural and economic center, a place with extraordinary beauty that continues to welcome visitors from around the world. But despite its beauty, South Africa's murder rate is among the highest in the world. In 2024, the country recorded 26,232 homicides, about 42 murders per 100,000 people, or roughly 52 a day in a nation of 62 million. For comparison, the United States saw about 18,800 murders in 2022, a rate of 5.6 per 100,000 in a population more than 5 times larger. This means that South Africa's murder rate is nearly 8 times higher than in the U.S. Much of this violence is driven by severe inequality, entrenched gang activity, particularly around Cape Town, strained policing resources, historical trauma left by apartheid, and high levels of interpersonal and alcohol-related violence. Khayelitsha, where Anni's body was found, is one of South Africa's largest and fastest-growing townships, located on the Cape Flats, about 30 kilometers from Cape Town. Established in the 1980s under apartheid, it was created to segregate Black South Africans, and it grew rapidly as people were forcibly relocated there. Today, Khayelitsha is known for its vibrant community, resilience, and cultural richness, but it also faces major challenges, including poverty, unemployment rates as high as 50%, overcrowding, and limited access to services. Most people live in shanties made from discarded materials, including cardboard, tar paper, and scraps of metal and wood, without electricity, sewage, or running water. Despite these difficulties, it has a strong entrepreneurial spirit, active civic groups, and a growing arts and food scene that reflects its residents' creativity and determination.
Vinod Hindocha, Anni's father, descended from a family of Indian traders who had lived for generations in Uganda's Indian community. But when Idi Amin expelled Asians from Uganda in 1972, Vinod, then 23, fled to Austria with his parents and 4 siblings, with only 55 British pounds to their name. They lived in a tent for months until Sweden offered them visas. They rebuilt their life in the Swedish town of Mariestad, working at a farm picking strawberries to support their family and learning the language of their new country. Mariestad is a small, charming, picturesque town in south-central Sweden on the shores of Lake Vänern, where summers are spent lounging along the lake's shimmering edge. With a population of roughly 25,000 people, it's known for its historic town center, peaceful waterfront, and strong sense of community. Families often stay for generations, captivated by the peaceful beauty and the friendly people. The Hindocha family felt welcomed in Mariestad, and despite looking different, they blended seamlessly into the community. Vinod went to school and became an electrical engineer for Electrolux before he launched his own business selling electrical equipment supplies. He met his wife, Nilam, also a Ugandan refugee, in 1976. It was a perfect match. Where he was shy and pedantic, she was warm and outgoing. Together, they happily raised 3 children. Ami was born in 1977, Anni Nina followed 5 years later in March 1982, and their younger brother Anish arrived in 1988. They grew up in a close-knit family, along with their cousins who lived nearby. Nilam and Vinod encouraged their children to stay connected to their Indian roots and to speak Gujarati at home. Later, when Anni chose to marry in Mumbai, it felt like a meaningful affirmation of their Indian heritage, and it made her parents very proud. Anni was intelligent, charismatic, fashionable, and beautiful. Her friends called her Indian Barbie. Vinod doted on his youngest daughter, buying her a new car and giving her a generous down payment for an apartment in Stockholm after she graduated from college with an engineering degree. In 2006, when Nilam was diagnosed with stomach cancer, Anni took a year off from her studies to nurse her mother back to health. Later, she went to work for the telecommunications giant Ericsson as a logistics manager. Once in her mid-20s, Anni started thinking about finding a partner and starting a family. She admired Ami's marriage and adored her niece and nephew. She began spending weekends in London, staying with friends and family. Because she wanted to marry someone of Indian descent, her prospects were better there. We'll be back after a break.
Anni's aunt, who prided herself on her matchmaking skills, met Shrien Dewani and was impressed by his good looks, education, and charm. She quickly decided that he would be a perfect match for her niece. And she was right. When they met for the first time for coffee at Starbucks in September 2009, it wasn't exactly love at first sight, but there was mutual interest. They agreed to see each other again. Their first official date was to see Lion King, after which Shrien sent Anni flowers every day at work. In November, Anni introduced her new boyfriend to her parents. He touched their feet in a gesture of humility and respect, which surprised and impressed them. If any current or future suitors of our children are listening, please don't ever, ever touch my feet.
Nor mine.
Vinod had checked into Shrien's background, and he was pleased with what he learned, except for one thing. He'd abruptly called off his previous relationship with a millionaire's daughter after they'd had a lavish engagement party in London. Shrien addressed the issue with Vinod, and he told him to ask him any question he wanted, but his future father-in-law told him that as long as he loved Anni and promised to take good care of her, that was all he needed to hear. And Shrien agreed, and Vinod gave his blessing. Anni and Shrien found that they came from remarkably similar backgrounds. Both were Hindu, descended from Gujarati families, and were members of India's merchant class who had escaped Idi Amin's Uganda and rebuilt their lives. Shrien's father, Prakash, had moved to Kenya, where his own parents had settled after leaving Gujarat, before moving to Bristol, England, where he studied pharmacology. He opened a pharmacy and later expanded into a successful chain of care homes for the elderly. He and his wife Sheila raised 3 children, Prayan, Shrien, and Ria, with a strong emphasis on discipline, education, and professional success. The Dewanis worked hard to build a comfortable life in the UK. From a young age, Shrien was known as intelligent, meticulous, and introverted, the quieter sibling sandwiched between a confident older brother and a younger sister. Teachers and classmates described him as bright and studious, someone who took pride in appearances and excelled academically. After attending a prestigious prep school, he earned an accounting degree from the University of Manchester, then taught English and math in Ghana before joining the elite accounting firm Deloitte in London. Within a year, he left to help his older brother, Prayan, run the rapidly growing family company, PSP Healthcare. He became a millionaire before turning 30. Shrien had grown into a friendly and outgoing man, though some felt he carried himself with an air of superiority and flaunted his wealth. He enjoyed the finer things in life and could be a bit flashy at times, but he was affable, good-humored, and generous with his friends and family. Shrien and Anni entered into an exclusive long-term relationship, but the distance between them sometimes created tension and even led to a brief breakup. So remember, Anni is living in Stockholm,
Right.
and he's in London.
Yep.
So Shrien was an attractive, well-groomed man who dressed impeccably, but friends said Anni sometimes teased him behind his back about his teeth.
Oh,
His 2 front teeth were slightly longer than the others, giving him what she jokingly referred to as a rabbit-like appearance.
it's not very nice.
He is a handsome man, but once you see that, you're like, oh yeah, he
Yeah.
kind of does. Shrien told Anni he did not believe in sex before marriage. It's not clear if this caused problems for the couple, but her cousin said that she grew frustrated that he wasn't more openly affectionate with her. When Anni mentioned it to her father, he told her it was a good thing that Shrien respected her. In early 2010, Anni quit her job at Ericsson, sold her apartment in Stockholm, and moved to London to be closer to Shrien. She and her cousin, her best friend, Sneha, rented an apartment together, savoring what felt like their final opportunity of carefree single living before both women married and started families of their own. When the Hindocha and Dewani families met in person in May 2010, Vinod, successful in his own right, found himself intimidated by the Dewani's vast wealth, but he was impressed by their warmth and charm. When the Hindochas were presented with a gift from the Dewanis, a puja thali, they were surprised. It is a deeply symbolic gesture in Indian culture. It signaled the Dewani's acceptance of the match, that the family considered the match all but sealed. Anni herself seemed surprised by the gift. She and Shrien hadn't even discussed marriage, yet the puja thali made it feel as though she'd already accepted a proposal. Seems like this is maybe the last step of courting before the marriage.
She was not quite ready for that.
Yeah. The gesture sent her into a tailspin, and she briefly considered ending the relationship altogether. She wasn't sure that she was ready for a long-term future with Shrien, or if she wanted one at all. But in June, Shrien whisked Anni away in a private plane to Paris for a proposal she suspected was coming, especially after the puja thali gesture from his family to hers. Shrien went all out. He bought Anni a new designer dress, Christian Dior shoes, and at the Hotel Ritz, a waiter lifted a silver cloche to reveal a single red rose and a 25,000-pound engagement ring.
That's a heavy engagement.
Engagement ring. They'd been together for less than a year, and while Anni said yes, hopeful for what their future might bring, she still carried quiet doubts about the pace at which everything was moving.
It reminds me a lot of my proposal to you.
Other
than the private plane to Paris, and other than the designer clothing and the expensive engagement.
In what way does it remind you of our engagement?
Really, in no way.
No way.
Other than all that stuff you just said.
Well, it was a lovely engagement.
Thank you.
Yours was. Ours was. But theirs was too. I mean, that's,
Sounds very nice.
Some grand gestures there. It was funny because it was a surprise, and I think that Shrien had her cousin or someone pack, like, her toiletries and things. So never surprise a woman when she does not have her skin and hair care products, right?
For sure.
Despite her doubts, Anni and Shrien were married under a full moon on October 29th, 2010, in front of 300 guests near Mumbai, India, on Lake Powai. Anni looked stunning, wearing a custom green and gold sari bathed in jewels as she was carried down the aisle by her brother, uncle, and 2 cousins. Shrien waited for her at the altar behind a curtain wearing a beige turban and suit. It was a grand 3-day celebration with horse-drawn carriages, elephants, beautiful flowers, and elaborate costumes. The couple appeared to radiate joy, but some guests felt that Anni seemed strangely detached from the festivities, despite having spent 3 months in India planning every detail of the wedding herself. Over the 3 days, there were 5 traditional ceremonies and 3 banquets. The affair is said to cost about 200,000 pounds.
Someday I would like to be invited to an elaborate Indian wedding because I just think it sounds so amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The wedding in India was not legally binding. The couple had planned to make the marriage official with a civil ceremony after their honeymoon. Because the marriage was never made official, Shrien nor the Dewanis had legal financial obligation to Anni's family or her estate after her death. And that is why I titled the episode Anni Hindocha and Shrien Dewani, because their marriage was not official.
Interesting.
The newlyweds waited 2 weeks before embarking on their honeymoon. Shrien planned the trip, wanting to surprise Anni. He told friends that he chose South Africa because it represented their initials. There are some reports that Anni was disappointed with the choice of South Africa, but she went along with it. They left for South Africa on November 8th, 2010, and spent 4 days in Kruger National Park, one of Africa's most famous wildlife reserves. Located in South Africa along the border of Mozambique, it spans 7,600 square miles, about the size of New Jersey. It's known for its remarkable biodiversity, including the Big Five, hundreds of bird species, and a mix of savanna, woodlands, and rivers. Okay, here's a short quiz. What do you think the top 5 are?
Oh, gosh. Giraffe?
Nope.
Elephant?
Yes.
Tiger or lion?
Lion, not tiger. I'm just going to tell you. Lions, leopards, elephant, rhino, and buffalo.
Okay, I was going to say rhino, but that was Probably all I would have gotten.
I hope someday there's so many places I want to visit now that we've
Yeah.
done the podcast. There's so many more places I would want to
Yeah.
visit, but
So amazing.
it would just be amazing. The park is considered one of the best places in the world to see wildlife up close in its natural habitat. On Friday, November 12, 2010, they flew to Cape Town for the second leg of their honeymoon. But even during the honeymoon, tensions rose. Anni sent her cousin text messages that they were fighting, and even that she hated her husband and regretted the marriage. One message said, "Crying has become my new hobby." Another read, "He's a really good guy in all ways, but I just don't feel happy with him at all." When she spoke with her parents, she told Vinod in Swedish that she had a lot to tell him when they returned from South Africa. He too felt that she already regretted the marriage.
It's really sad to have that level of regret that early
Yeah.
on. Zola Tonga was a 31-year-old insurance salesman and building inspector. He supported his mother and younger siblings along with his wife and 5 children. He was having some difficulty making ends meet. For extra income, he began working as a taxi driver in his off hours using his girlfriend's vehicle, a Volkswagen Charon.
I've read differing accounts whether he had a wife or a girlfriend or both.
Okay. He met Anni and Shrien after picking them up from the airport. They arranged to have him pick them up the next night for dinner. The newlyweds spent most of Saturday relaxing by the pool at the Cape Grace before heading out for a late dinner. They had originally booked a table at the upscale 96 Winery Road, but decided they weren't hungry enough for a multi-course meal. Their driver, Zola Tongo, suggested a more casual option, the Surfside restaurant, tucked into a dingy strip mall in the beach town of Strand, about 30 minutes from Cape Town. It was an unusual choice for a honeymoon dinner, especially for a couple dressed so elegantly.
Our friend Natasha from South Africa said this would be akin to someone out to dinner in New York City going to Wendy's.
Okay.
It was an odd location. It was an odd choice.
Yeah. Pretty sure I've been to Wendy's in New York City before.
Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong going to Wendy's, but if you went to the Wendy's on the wrong side of town when you were dressed in a tuxedo.
Yeah, I get it. Anni and Shrien were captured on surveillance at 9:33 p.m., entering the slightly tacky beachfront restaurant. Shrien wore a tailored black suit, while Anni, in a short dress and strappy high heels, with a shawl over her shoulders, looked mildly annoyed as they walked inside. She ordered a vegetable curry and a white wine, while Shrien chose sushi and vodka. By 10:24 p.m., the couple was again captured on camera, leaving the restaurant and getting into Tongo's taxi. He had been their driver since the previous day when he'd picked them up at the airport and taken them to their 5-star hotel, showing them the best views Cape Town had to offer. He appeared professional, courteous, and proud of his work. Earlier that evening, after dropping the couple off, Shrien had pulled Tongo aside, out of Anni's earshot, and told him the job needed to be done that night or his life could be in danger.
Allegedly.
After dinner, Zola didn't take them back to Cape Grace, but instead drove them toward more rural areas. Shrien later claimed that Anni had asked to see the real Africa, but even locals avoid venturing out after dark, and tourists are strongly warned against entering the rougher townships at night where the crime rate is higher.
This is one of the most problematic points of the story. Like, no one would willingly go to this area at night, especially a tourist, especially wealthy tourists. Police won't even respond to a call unless there are 5 officers together.
Yeah, interesting.
Like, it's that dangerous.
It did make me think, though, there are tourists that like to go to places like that. Like, I was thinking about Brazil, actually, because there are places in Brazil, like near Rio, called the favelas, which are like the slums. And people pay to have someone drive them through and tour that area. But it doesn't sound like Shrien and Anni would be into that sort of thing, especially not at night.
Especially not at night.
Yeah.
And remember, this is one of the most dangerous places in the world, really.
Yeah. The roads were bumpy and unpaved, but Anni and Shrien sat in the back seat, thumbing through photos from their safari, oblivious to their surroundings and unaware that their driver was taking them into a very rough area. While driving, Zola sent Shrien a text message, reminding him not to forget to leave payment. Shrien had quietly exchanged American dollars for 10,000 South African rand, which is about 1,370 US dollars, that afternoon. He had carefully placed an envelope of cash in the pocket on the back of the passenger seat.
Zola Tango had actually taken Shrien to a store where he could exchange American dollars for a rand.
Okay. While at a stop sign, 2 armed men approached the taxi, slamming their guns on the windshield. One man opened the driver's door and demanded Zola get out and get into the back seat with Shrien and Anni. The second man sat in the passenger seat and pointed his gun into the back seat. He demanded they hand over anything of value. They stripped themselves of their belongings, a Giorgio Armani watch, a Cartier watch, a camera, a white gold and diamond bracelet, a leather purse, Anni's BlackBerry, and about 5,000 rand. When Shrien tried to slyly keep his own BlackBerry, the hijacker noticed, ordered him to hand it over, and warned that he would kill him if he tried anything like that again. As the chaos unfolded, Anni quietly slipped off her wedding and engagement rings and tucked them between the seat cushions. The driver stopped at a gas station and forced Zola out of the taxi. Anni cried in the back seat and pleaded with the carjackers. "We're on our honeymoon. We don't have any money with us. Please, let us go." She continued to scream. The hijackers told Shrien to make her be quiet or they would shoot her. "We just want the car. We won't hurt you," the men said. They drove for another 10 minutes before the vehicle came to a sudden stop. The gunmen shouted at Shrien to get out. He later said he tried to resist and held on to Anni, but one of the men cocked his gun and pressed it to Shrien's temple. Believing he had no choice, he crawled out of a window of the van. As the van sped off into the night, he could hear Anni's screams trailing off. He found himself alone and disoriented on a dark, unpaved road in a rural area.
What a horrifying scene.
It is really terrifying, especially in a strange country you're not familiar with. And yeah, that just sounds really scary. Just before midnight on November 13th, Vinod Hindocha, Anni's father, received a life-changing phone call. It was his new friend, Prakash Dewani, informing him that Anni had been abducted outside of Cape Town. He tried to calm Vinod and assure him that they would be able to negotiate with Anni's captors to release her, as money was no object. They would pay whatever ransom necessary. They would certainly get her back. Prakash made travel arrangements. The men would meet in Amsterdam and then fly to Cape Town together.
So remember that Vinod is in Sweden and Prakash is in England.
Right. Moments later, Shrien called and apologized vociferously. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for not taking better care of your daughter." He repeated the words several times while sobbing. Vinod told him that he would be there soon.
So at this point, Vinod feels like Shrien is his son. He feels a great deal of affection for him, and he feels badly that he's going through this, and he's heartbroken that Anni is lost.
The weather was bad and the roads were icy. It was a 2.5-hour drive to the airport in good weather. Vinod had 2 hours to get there. He drove like a madman and nearly swerved off of the road several times, but made it to the airport for a 3 a.m. flight to Amsterdam. He was out of his mind with worry on the 2-hour flight. Once he arrived, he rushed off the plane to call home. As soon as Nilam answered, he heard sobbing on the line. His worst nightmare, every parent's worst nightmare, was coming to life. He dropped to his knees and wept openly at the airport. His treasured daughter was gone. Inconceivable.
When he called home, no one said that Anni was gone, but just he could hear his family there was weeping, and he knew that it was bad news.
So sad. He somehow made it onto the next flight with Prakash Dewani, who had also heard about Anni's death and was badly shaken. The flight from Amsterdam to South Africa was 11 hours long. Vinod cried for much of the flight, blind with grief. Prakash tried to comfort his friend. He was also very emotional.
The men both thought that Anni was kidnapped for money.
Okay.
And they were very concerned, but they thought they both had money and they would have paid anything to get Anni back.
Right.
So they were, kind of comforted by that thought. Like, we'll get her back. We'll pay whatever it takes. The kidnappers will be in touch with us and we will figure this out when we get to South Africa.
Yeah.
So when they found out that she was shot, they were
a big shock,
both
I'm
shocked.
sure. Yeah. When they arrived in South Africa, 24 hours after Anni's abduction, they were met at the airport by ambassadors from Sweden and Great Britain who drove them to the Cape Grace Hotel to meet with Shrien. The men hugged, but there was little to say. Vinod was still in a state of shock, while Shrien seemed distant and not forthcoming. He was constantly on his phone or laptop, but didn't seem to be in emotional distress. When Vinod said he wanted to see Anni, Shrien told him he could not because her body was not ready to be viewed. He didn't care, he just wanted to see his daughter, but he complied with Shrien's wishes. The next morning, when he went to the morgue to see Anni, Shrien declined to go, saying it would be too painful for him. He stayed behind to get a haircut and buy a new suit. That's a really odd choices right there.
I read part of Vinod's book, and he talks about this, how he literally couldn't stop crying. He was in such grief and shock, and he never saw Shrien shed a tear, and he didn't seem to be as emotional as he expected him to be.
Right.
People process grief differently, but he just felt like he was very detached.
Yeah. The following day, the three men flew with Anni's body back to Bristol, England. We'll be back after a break.
The Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, or DPCI, commonly known as the Hawks, is an elite unit of the South African Police Service tasked with handling the country's most serious offenses. Their mandate includes investigating organized and violent crime, major commercial offenses, corruption, illicit mining, human trafficking, and other high-profile or national priority cases. The murder of a wealthy tourist came under their purview. While carjackings are relatively common, the victims are not usually killed, and tourists are rarely targeted for murder. Captain Paul Hendrikse led the investigation. He spoke briefly with Tango and believed his account and released him fairly quickly. The investigators were immediately suspicious of Shrien Dewani and some of the decisions he made. Why, for example, had Anni and Shrien chosen to ride from the airport with Tango instead of taking the Cape Grace's dedicated car service? And what would have compelled them to drive into one of Cape Town's most dangerous townships after dark? And why would Zola Tango have agreed to drive them there? Why was the vehicle not sold for parts or burned to destroy evidence? And why would the carjackers let two witnesses who could clearly identify them walk free, yet kill Anni moments later?
All seem like very good questions.
And Shrien's account of November 13 shifted with each telling. He initially told a Daily Mail reporter that the visit to the rural township had been Anni's idea, claiming that she wanted to see the real South Africa. But in an interview with The Sun a week later, he gave a different account, saying it was Zola Tango who suggested the detour so that they could see some African dancing, and that he and Anni had been unsure about the plan. Shrien also changed his description of how he was forced from the car. First, he claimed he'd been pushed out the back door while the vehicle was still moving. In a later interview, however, he said that the attackers couldn't get me out because the child locks were on, so they dragged me out of the window while I was struggling and screaming. But both of these accounts were suspicious because Shrien didn't have any injuries, and you would think in both of these cases that he would have suffered some sort of injury, right?
Yep.
And perhaps most damning was that there was no evidence that Anni had been sexually assaulted, though there was one bruise in the shape of a hand on her upper thigh. So investigators couldn't figure out why Anni was left in the car and Zola and Shrien were ousted from the car if she wasn't sexually assaulted.
Right.
So that's how they came to the conclusion that it must have been a contracted hit. Days after the murder, Shrien called Captain Hendrikse and asked if they'd found Anni's engagement ring. He said no, and Shrien told him that it was between the seats in the van. But in Shrien's original statement, he'd said that Anni had handed the ring over to the carjackers. When Hendrikse pointed out this discrepancy, Shrien grew flustered. So later, an eyewitness came forward and said that she had seen Anni in the back of the van and thought that her dress was pulled up and her underwear was pulled down,
Hmm.
and that she saw evidence of sexual assault.
Okay.
But I've seen pictures of the crime scene being investigated, and police were holding up white sheets so the public couldn't see. So I'm a little suspicious of this account.
Yeah.
Remember the bloody fingerprints found on the van? We talked about that at the very
Right. Yep.
beginning. Police traced them to 25-year-old Kalila Mengeni. He did have a criminal record. 5 years earlier, he'd been arrested for killing a man in a bar fight, though he was ultimately cleared of that charge. He confessed to his part in Anni's murder and named his accomplice, a man named Maziwa Madora Lennox Kwabe. He also confessed to his part in the murder and carjacking. A few days later, taxi driver Zola Tango, who'd been in hiding, turned himself into the police. On November 22nd, when he had his first court appearance, he arrived covered from head to toe in a white sheet. The prosecutor was prepared to offer Tango a plea deal in exchange for more information, but the Hindocha family first had to give their consent. It was a painstaking decision, yet after much deliberation, they agreed. So the Dewanis had hired a high-powered publicist, Max Clifford, to deal with the media. That was fine, but when they demanded the Hindochas sign an agreement to not talk to the press without their approval, Vinod flatly refused, offended. Clifford convinced Shrien to give an interview to the UK tabloid The Sun. Here's a clip.
Anni was amazing. There was never a quiet moment when she was in the room. The proposal was the best moment of my life. I'd arranged for a night in Paris at the Ritz Hotel.
That's some surprise.
Yeah.
I'll tell my wife about this. She'll just think I'm rubbish.
Yeah. The ring was a single solitaire diamond. The maitre d' at the restaurant served it on a ring cushion. And Anni was so excited to get the ring, I didn't even have a chance to fully ask the question. So it was always the joke that I haven't ever actually asked her to marry me because we were so excited. I just got married to the girl of my dreams, and she actually was the girl of my dreams.
Do you think that he sounds sincere and in love with his wife?
Yeah, to me, it sounds like he does.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's possible that he had some media training from his publicist.
Sure.
When it came time for Anni's funeral, tensions mounted between the two families. The Hindochas would have preferred to have the funeral in Sweden, but they allowed Shrien to make the arrangements. Things deteriorated further when Shrien refused Ammi's request to dress her sister for the funeral, a role traditionally reserved for female relatives in Hindu custom. Ammi watched in horror as Shrien handled Anni's body roughly, forcing gold bangles onto her swollen wrist. A week after her murder, on November 21st, 2010, Anni was laid to rest. 1,500 mourners packed a London concert hall for her funeral. Before the service, the Hindocha family wanted a quiet moment alone to say goodbye to Anni, but Shrien denied them that. When Ammi circumvented him and asked the funeral parlor manager for access, Shrien stormed into the room, caused a scene, and shattered their final moments with Anni. The family had placed red roses and handwritten heartfelt messages to Anni around her and her casket. Shrien tossed them onto the ground. He said he didn't want Anni's casket to look like a dustbin. For the family, it felt unforgivable and indicative of something dark taking root between the two families. Shrien apologized a few days later, but the hurt ran too deep for his words to repair the damage. The day before Anni's funeral, Shrien had hosted a pizza party. When Vinod found out, he was deeply unsettled. He thought it was inappropriate and disrespectful of Shrien. Shrien tried to explain himself that Anni had once said to him that when she died, she wanted to be celebrated and not mourned, but Vinod felt this wasn't true. In the days since Anni's murder, he'd grown increasingly concerned over Shrien's behavior. He had more questions than answers, and Shrien's evasiveness only heightened his concern. Vinod flew back to Cape Town, desperate for clarity. Even within the Hindocha family, opinions had split. Vinod's mother was convinced Shrien had a hand in Anni's death. Ami believed that he was another victim, and Vinod himself no longer knew what to think. What do you think of Shrien's behavior at the funeral and the events surrounding the funeral?
I mean, it doesn't seem very appropriate, but at the same time, I know, death can bring out all sorts of things in people that, don't seem natural or normal. And, everyone grieves and processes in a different way. So I can't say like, oh, that's super suspicious. It definitely seems inappropriate and, out of the ordinary, but.
He seemed more angry than emotional. And I think that's why her family didn't know what to think.
Yeah, fair.
On December 7th, 2010, Vinod was present for Zola Tango's court appearance. He pleaded guilty to murder, aggravated robbery, and kidnapping, and agreed to testify against the others involved. In return, he would receive an 18-year sentence with a possibility of parole after 12, far lighter than the typical South African penalty for such a crime, which is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Tango asked to speak privately with Vinod to ask for forgiveness, but he was too overwhelmed with grief to accept the meeting. Shock rippled through the courtroom as the prosecutor told the judge that Tango hadn't acted on his own. Shrien Dewani had hired him to kill his bride. In his confession, Tango claimed that Shrien first approached him after the drive from the airport to the Cape Grace Hotel. While Anni went inside to check into the hotel, Shrien stayed behind and spoke with Tango in the taxi for about 10 minutes, saying he needed someone taken off the scene. Hotel surveillance later confirmed that Shrien entered the lobby roughly 10 minutes after his wife. They secretly met at noon the next day while Anni was by the pool. Tango drove him to exchange money at a jewelry store in town to pay him and the hired killers. He went to the jewelry store because he said it was a better exchange rate than he would have received at the hotel.
Okay.
But it might have been, an attempt to be more secretive too. Shrien exchanged $1,500 for 10,000 South African rand. Shrien had agreed to pay Tango 5,000 rand and the killers 15,000 rand, which is about $1,900. To me, that seems like a shockingly small amount of money, but in a country where poverty is widespread and opportunities are limited, especially for young men living in South Africa's townships, even a few thousand rand can feel like a life-changing amount of money. That desperation doesn't excuse anything, but it helps explain how such a heartbreaking deal could ever be made.
The thing that kind of shocks me, and maybe I'll learn something different here, but the gall it would take to approach your taxi driver that you've only known for a short time and just be like, hey, do you know someone who can...
Right. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
And a lot of people point to that as he knew him for literally an hour and, is trying to make an agreement.
Yeah.
To find hitmen, Tango reached out to his friend Mande Mbalambo, a hotel receptionist who worked as a middleman in the plan. He connected Tango with Mziwa Madura Lennox Kwabe, a drug dealer and part-time DJ, to complete the hit on Anni. Kwabe then recruited Kolila Mngeni to help. The men waited at a specific intersection when Tango stopped at the stop sign. Kwabe got behind the wheel wearing a pair of yellow kitchen gloves and forced Tango out of the driver's seat while Mngeni got into the passenger seat. It was understood that Tango and Shrien would be released free of injuries. The hijackers drove around for a while with the Newlyweds cowering in the back seat before Shrien was forced out near Khayelitsha. The car drove on for 3 minutes until it stopped abruptly. The gunman reached over from the front seat and shot Anni at close range from the front seat with a single bullet. It nicked her thumb, indicating that she'd raised her hand in self-defense, then grazed 2 veins in her neck, severed her spinal cord, and then exited through her back. The bullet lodged into the leather seat behind her. If she hadn't died instantly, the injuries were so severe that she would have bled out in minutes. Kwabe and Mngeni disagreed on who pulled the trigger, each accusing the other, but later allegations surfaced that the men's confessions were coerced, that they'd been beaten with flashlights and suffocated with plastic bags placed over their heads before they'd admitted to their part in the crime. Had the South African government rushed to solve the crime?
Just months before Anni's murder, South Africa had hosted the 2010 FIFA World Cup, which ran from June to July 2010. The country had poured tens of billions of rand, roughly 3 to 5 billion US dollars, into preparing for the event, building and renovating stadiums, upgrading airports and highways, boosting police visibility, and launching global advertising campaigns. It wasn't just about holding a successful tournament. South Africa hoped the World Cup would spark a long-term surge in tourism, reshape international perceptions of safety, and cement the country as a modern, world-class destination. South Africa's economy has long struggled with inequality, high unemployment, and slow growth, so increasing tourism was seen as a crucial way to strengthen the country financially. So, when a young tourist was murdered later that same year, the timing was disastrous. The eyes of the world were still on South Africa, and officials were desperate not to lose the momentum or goodwill that they had built. The idea that a honeymooning visitor had been killed in a township threatened to reignite the very fears about violent crime that the World Cup had tried so hard to quiet. Under that kind of scrutiny, police moved quickly, some would say too quickly, to present a clear narrative, arrests, confessions, and a straightforward hijacking gone wrong story. But that speed came at a cost. In the months and years that followed, key witnesses contradicted themselves, evidence didn't line up, and allegations surfaced that some confessions had been coerced. In hindsight, it's hard not to see how the pressure to protect the country's newly polished reputation may have shaped and possibly rushed the investigation. South Africa had just hosted a remarkably successful World Cup, earning global praise and experiencing far fewer problems than many had predicted. But that post-tournament optimism evaporated quickly. Anni's murder became an international headline almost overnight, overshadowing the country's hard-won moment on the world stage and creating intense pressure for authorities to solve the case swiftly.
All of this to say, if they can pin the murder on Anni's significant other rather than, these thugs,
right,
it would benefit.
That would look better.
Yeah, it would look much better.
Shrien Dewani heard about his arrest warrant in the media before he was contacted by authorities. A judge had issued the warrant for his arrest on December 8, 2010. He was charged with kidnapping, robbery, conspiracy to commit murder, and murder. Law enforcement believed that he had orchestrated the carjacking and Anni's murder. He surrendered to police near his home in Bristol, England. 2 days later, he was released on £250,000 bail and required to wear an ankle monitor while remaining under house arrest. The evidence against him included video surveillance of him meeting with Zola Tango in the lobby of the Cape Grace, exchanging a white envelope the day after Anni's murder, and text messages between them while Shrien and Anni were in the back of the taxi about payment. Shrien claimed that the money in the envelope was money that he owed Tango for his taxi service. Prosecutors also pointed to his shifting statements after the attack, unexplained gaps in the timeline, and the fact that he had concealed significant parts of his personal life from Anni, details, they argued, suggesting motive and deception. Shrien's arrest made international headlines. After seeing his picture in a newspaper, a man named Leopold Leiser, a male escort known by the name German Master, came forward claiming that Shrien had paid him on 3 separate occasions for kinky sex. Leopold Leiser told the British tabloid The Sun that Shrien had confided in him that, although Anni was a nice, lovely girl whom he liked, he felt trapped in his engagement because breaking it off would lead to him being disowned by his family. Shrien told Leiser that he needed to find a way out of the marriage. After he sold his story to The Sun, Shrien threatened to sue him for libel. Sadly, the media attention and stress caused Leiser to take his own life in 2016. But another man also came forward to investigators, a 53-year-old who worked for the British Parliament. They had met at a London gay fetish club called Hoist. The Daily Star reported that the man told detectives that Dewani was a submissive who enjoyed sadomasochism and dressing up in leather. For someone like Shrien, raised in a respected, traditional Indian family, Where reputation, marriage, and community perception carry enormous weight, being gay or bisexual could be viewed as deeply shameful, something he might fear admitting. But the question remained, could that truly be a motive for murder? But others argued that Shrien couldn't have possibly arranged a murder-for-hire plot so quickly. They had been in South Africa for 24 hours before Anni was murdered, and Zola Tango had no criminal history and made good money between his two jobs. Why would he arrange a hit on Anni for so little money? The Hindocha family wasn't sure what to think. Ami recalled a conversation she had had with Anni a few weeks before the wedding when she was ready to call it off. She had been so angry with Shrien that she removed her engagement ring from her finger and threw it at him across the room. Anni called her sister and told her that Shrien was controlling and a neat freak.
There were a lot of things that Shrien did in their short relationship that might be red flags. He wouldn't allow Anni to eat sweets around him. He expected her to fold the dirty laundry before putting it in the hamper.
Wow.
And he presented her with a spreadsheet and said, you need to track your spending.
Oh boy, yeah, those are all red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Ami calmed Anni down, telling her that hundreds of people had made their travel arrangements and chalked her stress up to pre-wedding jitters. But now she wondered if she pushed her sister into an impossible situation that resulted in her death.
I have a lot of empathy for Ami and, the auntie who, helped arrange the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think everyone feels like a little bit of guilt. Like, why didn't we see these red flags? But
yeah, there's just no way to know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back after a break.
Shrien had been under house arrest at his family's compound in Bristol. In February, an ambulance was seen at the house. Later, it was reported that Shrien swallowed 46 pills, including diazepam, a fast-acting benzodiazepine used to reduce anxiety, relax muscles, and calm the nervous system. Since Anni's murder, he'd fallen into a deep depression, suffered from PTSD, and lost 28 pounds. He was hospitalized for several weeks, and when he began exhibiting alarming psychotic symptoms, he was transferred to a high-security facility. Some thought this was an orchestrated attempt to fight extradition to South Africa and manipulate the judicial system. In South Africa, Anni's case dominated front pages, nightly broadcasts, and talk radio, sparking a national conversation about crime, policing, and justice. Reporters scrutinized every inconsistency and every new claim, with the public following along in real time. Internationally, the story was just as relentless. UK tabloids fixated on every twist in the narrative. Swedish outlets followed the Hindocha family closely, and Indian media focused on Anni herself. With so many countries invested, the case never had a chance to be investigated quietly. The intense press attention added pressure on investigators and prosecutors, shaping public perception long before the courtroom arguments began and turning a single tragedy into a global spectacle. In researching this case, I realized how relentless the UK tabloids are.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had any experience with the UK tabloids?
Oh, a little
the
bit,
Daily Mail is one of them.
Yeah.
They are maybe a little more newsy, but just shocking how many there are, and just
yeah, they're tenacious. They don't give up on a story like this, especially.
And super mean-spirited.
Yeah.
And definitely put the cart before the horse many times. Public opinion on Shrien depended heavily on geography. In the UK and Sweden, people believed he was guilty. In India, opinion was mixed, but often skeptical of his guilt. And in South Africa, views were deeply divided, with early suspicion giving way to widespread doubt as the investigation unraveled and the witnesses' credibility collapsed. In telling the story, it's hard because there are many different accounts on depending on who you talk to and who was the shooter, who wasn't the shooter. It's
tough to get reliable information. Yeah.
6 months after her murder, Nalam and Vinod, along with the rest of their family, filled 2 boats and scattered Anni's ashes in the peaceful, sparkling waters of Lake Veneren, the 3rd largest lake in Europe, near their home in Mariestad. Anni had spent countless summer days there laughing and swimming with friends and family, and it remains a place where they return to remember happy memories. With so many unanswered questions, the Hindochas themselves were unable to grieve properly for Anni. Vinod described the years since her murder as torture. We need to know what happened to our beautiful daughter. The only thoughts we have in our head are, why did she die? We need to know the truth. Before the start of the first trial, Anni Hindocha, who was frail from her recent cancer treatment, said, "We know it's going to be very difficult, but we will do anything to get justice. People say time heals wounds, but in our case, the wounds are deeper the longer we live without answers. Once this is over, we hope we can move forward with our lives, and our Anni can finally be at peace." These people are just the loveliest people. They have
Yeah.
such a large, loving, supportive family. It was really touching to me. They were heartbroken.
I can
Like, it
only
literally
imagine.
changed their whole family when they lost Anni.
Yeah.
Mande Mbalomba was never charged despite being the middleman. Lennox Kwabe signed a confession before the trial started. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison and would be eligible for parole after serving 16 years. As part of his plea agreement, he testified against Kolila Mingeni in August 2012 at his trial. So Mingeni is the only one who went to trial.
Okay.
At the end of his testimony, he turned to Vinod and begged forgiveness. Mingeni, who was in frail health after he'd been diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, maintained that it was Kwabe that fired the final shot at Anni, but his lawyer didn't put much of a defense up. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died in prison in October 2014 at only 27 years of age. By the time Shrien Dewani, 34, finally stood trial in South Africa in October 2014, nearly 4 years had passed since Anni's murder. He'd hired an excellent legal team. His extradition from the UK had been delayed for years due to serious concerns about his mental health. He'd been hospitalized, placed on suicide watch, and eventually transferred to a high-security psychiatric facility. Only after lengthy negotiations and assurances regarding his health was he declared fit to stand trial. On the first day of the trial, Shrien openly admitted in his plea statement that he was bisexual, something that he had concealed from both his family and from Anni. Prosecutors argued this secret gave him motive to escape the marriage, while the defense maintained that his sexuality was irrelevant and was being used to prejudice the case against him. There was no pressure from the Dewanis for Shrien to marry, and no prenup was signed, the defense argued. The court reviewed evidence showing that Shrien had visited gay porn and escort websites during the honeymoon and shortly after Anni's death. The day after Anni's murder, Shrien had spent hours on the website Gaydar.
What is the website Gaydar?
I think you can figure that out.
Okay.
Typically male seeking male.
It's like hooking up with, okay,
right,
gotcha.
Exactly. Leopold Leiser was called to testify, but his time on the stand was cut short when the judge questioned the relevance of his evidence. She barred him from describing a conversation in which Shrien admitted that he wasn't sure he wanted to go through with the wedding. But the trial ultimately turned on the credibility of the state's key witnesses, and this is where the prosecution's case collapsed. Although Zola Tango took the stand, the court also considered the earlier statements and confessions of the other men involved, and those accounts were riddled with contradictions. They didn't just differ on small points, they conflicted on nearly every major element of the alleged plot. When Shrien supposedly approached them, what was said, how the plan was arranged, and who carried out which part. The judge noted that Tango's testimony, quote, conflicted in virtually every material respect with the physical evidence, and that the shifting versions left the court with no coherent, reliable narrative.
Boy, that is problematic.
Further undermining the state's case were allegations from two of the men that their confessions had been coerced, claims that they were beaten with flashlights or suffocated with plastic bags. The police vehemently denied these claims, but whether they were true or not, the accusations cast additional doubt on their statements that the prosecution was relying on. Then came the issue of the missing text messages. The prosecution insisted that incriminating text messages had been exchanged between Shrien and Tongo from the back seat of the taxi, but the messages were never found. Shrien's phone was never recovered, and cell tower records only proved that messages were sent, not what they said. So this part to me is very frustrating.
Yeah.
We know that there were many text messages sent between Tongo and Shrien between, the time that he picked them up from the airport until the time of the kidnapping. We don't know what the text messages, they could have been innocuous. It could have been just like, hey, pick us up.
Pick you up or whatever.
But there were definitely, at the time that they were in the backseat of the taxi, there were several messages exchanged during that time. So it's hard to think that they wouldn't have been nefarious, right?
Well, unless they were like chatting with each other, trying to plot, trying to figure out a way out of the situation. But yeah, it seems pretty suspicious.
By the time the state rested on day 23, the judge found the evidence so unreliable and contradictory that she invoked Section 174 of South Africa's Criminal Procedure Act, ruling that no reasonable court could convict on the prosecution's case alone. As a result, the trial was dismissed before the defense had to present a single witness. Shrien Dewani was a free man. He left the courtroom legally cleared, but far from vindicated in the public eye. For the Hindocha family, the verdict offered no closure, only more questions about what really happened to Anni that night, and no reliable witnesses left to answer them.
And when a case is dismissed in this way in South Africa, can they retry him at some point if they find new evidence, or is it done?
I found that their judicial system seems very similar to ours, and he was acquitted, so he cannot be tried again.
So it was actually like an acquittal, not just,
Yes.
Gotcha.
After Shrien was acquitted in 2014, Anni's family pushed for a formal inquest in the UK, hoping it would finally answer the lingering questions about her death. An inquest was opened in 2016, but it soon stalled. The key witnesses were all in South Africa and refused to participate unless granted immunity, something the UK could not offer them. Without their testimony, the coroner determined that the inquest could not reach meaningful findings and formally closed it in 2017. No conclusions were issued beyond acknowledging that Anni had been unlawfully killed. For the Hindocha family, it was another devastating setback, yet another process that ended without answers.
That's so frustrating.
I'm so sad for them because you can see in Vinod's eyes, especially because just heartbroken.
And just to not have the answers to get closure, that's just so hard.
Yeah. Anni Hindocha deserves to be remembered for the life she lived, not just the way it ended. She was warm, witty, thoughtful, and deeply loved by her friends and family, who called her the glue that held them together. She was quick with a compliment and made people feel comfortable and happy in her presence. Those closest to her describe a young woman full of energy and compassion, someone who brought people together and cared fiercely for those around her. She was building a future she was excited about with plans and dreams that she should have had years to unfold. Her loss has left a profound void in the lives of everyone who knew her that they still feel today, haunted by the unanswered questions. Rest in peace, Anni. Zola Tongo was released in June 2022 after serving 12 years in prison. Anni's family had successfully blocked his release during his first parole hearing in 2020. Forensic testing has later revealed that Mngeni was actually not the shooter. Shrien now lives in London, where he serves as director of Evolve Care Group, a company that operates 8 nursing and care homes across the UK. He is reportedly in a long-term same-sex relationship with a Brazilian photographer, and he is on social media. In 2018, this was horrible. I was so sad when I read this. Vinod was in an industrial accident and his arm was ripped off his body.
Oh, no.
He was airlifted to the nearest hospital in hopes of saving his arm. I hadn't read any subsequent reports, but they thought that they would be able to reattach it.
Okay.
And
Wow.
yeah, he was going to be okay. The Hindochas were very touched by the support that they received from the South African people, who were mostly furious when Shrien Dewani was acquitted. They felt that the investigation was under-resourced, while Shrien's strong legal team and years of delays stemming from his illness and extradition worked to his advantage. By the time he finally went to trial, public outrage had cooled, and his eventual acquittal left many feeling the process had been a sham. Many citizens were offended that Shrien used the nation's crime problem as a scapegoat for his own motives, damaging their national reputation they had been working so hard to rebuild. People thought that he planned the honeymoon in South Africa because of the high murder rate, because, he felt like he could get away with it
Yeah.
then. I want to thank our listener, Natasha, for her help investigating. She pointed out that locals also said his version of events never made sense. No tourist or taxi driver would ever visit a township at 9 p.m. And Natasha said that many believe that the system failed Anni and her family.
Yeah, sure seems like it.
I'm not sure what to think about this case. Was it a random carjacking, a plot to kidnap two wealthy foreigners and strip them of their cash and valuables? Or was it a murder plot arranged by Shrien Dewani?
I don't know what to think of it either, because none of it really makes sense. Like the carjacking doesn't make sense that they would kill someone. I'm sure it does happen occasionally, but when somebody is carjacking a car, they're doing it for money. And you wouldn't want to get involved in something as serious as a murder if you can help it. But at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense that Shrien would have her killed like right after they got married. Their marriage wasn't even official yet. So it just seems a little weird too, but it seems more likely than the carjacking to me.
Or you could say, because their marriage wasn't official, like he didn't owe her anything.
Yeah.
Like had they been officially married, he would have had to have.
So financially, it would have been.
It would have been more advantageous for her to be murdered on the honeymoon than he would have owed her family, I guess, some of the estate then.
Right. And I guess maybe he felt like, if he was either bisexual or gay, like maybe he just, as things led up to the wedding, maybe he started feeling like he was, living a double life, or it wasn't the right life that he had planned. And maybe that's why.
Right. Or it could give him more time, without coming out to his family. If he could, I'm just grieving my wife. And
yeah.
I did want to go over the evidence one more time quickly, just so you can remember the inculpatory and exculpatory evidence. Shrien allegedly told Leopold Leiser that he didn't want to marry Anni and needed a way out. He hid his bisexuality from Anni and visited gay escort and porn sites during the honeymoon. CCTV showed Shrien entering the hotel 10 minutes after Anni. Cell tower data showed the text messages between Shrien and Tango from the back of the taxi, although we have no idea what they said. Tango claimed that Shrien discussed a staged carjacking, payment, and killing Anni. Many of Tango's claims were backed up by CCTV footage or cell phone data. So he did lie, but a lot of the things he said, he didn't know that they had the CCTV footage, but a lot of it did fit the footage.
Yeah.
So Shrien's account of being thrown from the car changed, and he had no injuries. His statements after the attack shifted in interviews and the media. Anni's family said that she had expressed fear and thrown her engagement ring before. Remember when she took off her engagement ring? And a lot of the text messages, I didn't read all of them from her cousin, did show that she had reservations.
Sure, yep.
And there were some gaps in the timeline. The exculpatory evidence, all key witnesses have multiple accounts and they all lied. Shrien also lied, though, about certain things. He had emphatically denied any questions about his sexuality.
Yeah.
2 suspects were allegedly beaten. The incriminating text messages from the back of the taxi were never recovered. There is no forensic or physical evidence linking Shrien to planning anything, no DNA, fingerprints, no payments, or digital trace. His defense, I forgot to mention this, said that the money that he had exchanged was he wanted to surprise Anni with a helicopter tour and he had to pay cash, and that's why he needed the money.
Okay.
All the men that were accused lied under oath. There was no financial motive for Anni's murder. We talked about this a little bit before, but the unlikelihood that Shrien met Tango and then, moments later was like, hey, can you help me kill my wife?
Right.
The honeymoon photos and witness accounts showed normal behavior. There was a lot of footage of Shrien and Anni, and they looked pretty happy. They looked not very romantic, but they were smiling and laughing together.
Yeah.
Although I did notice in a lot of the footage that I saw that Shrien was often walking ahead of Anni.
Okay. So a lot of what you listed as exculpatory evidence, it's more that they didn't have solid evidence to convict him. It's less that they had other potential, motives or other potential suspects or things like that. So I guess looking back on my earlier statement that I really have no idea, I now feel a little more strongly that Shrien probably was involved in this.
If I had to guess, I would also agree that Shrien probably had something to do with it. One thing that I have a hard time with is Tango and the taxi.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wasn't an official taxi service. I think he was just kind of,
Right.
taking money under the table.
Yep.
But why would he allow a murder to take place in his taxi?
Yeah.
And I don't think it was even his car. It was his wife's or girlfriend's
Yeah.
or something. But
that is a good point. Seems very strange.
yeah, I don't understand why he would agree to do that for so little money.
Yeah. Maybe the murder taking place in the car wasn't something he had planned. Maybe it was something that happened that he was, not on board with.
Right. It's possible that Anni was fighting back, especially after Shrien left the vehicle.
Right.
And they didn't know what to do with her,
Right.
because she does strike me as, a powerful woman who might fight back.
Yeah.
And the gunshot was maybe 5 or 6 centimeters from her face. So it's possible that, she got in their face and fought, and, they just shot her in the forehead, shot her in the, neck. And
Right.
because she was fighting back so hard.
Yeah.
So you don't think do you think justice was served?
No, I mean, it's very frustrating. The fact that all of these men had different testimony, and it seems like the decision made by the judge in this case was probably not the wrong decision, but I don't know if it was the investigation was botched or that so much time had passed that their stories started differing. But no, I think justice was definitely not served.
Do you think that Shrien's mental health issues were fabricated or real? Remember that he fought extradition for 4 years because of his mental health.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if...
And he had a pretty good team of lawyers. So I think that, I'm sure his distress was real in the beginning, but the 4 years, was probably extreme.
I mean, I have no idea, but yeah, it sounds very plausible that was something that was just used to delay as long as possible.
So if Shrien didn't plot Anni's murder, the alternate theory would be that Zola Tango arranged the kidnapping and robbing the tourists.
Right.
And that doesn't seem super plausible to
No,
me
it
either.
doesn't.
Something that I'm not sure if I expressed, like these 4 men, they weren't like in a gang together. The only one that had a record, I believe, was Mingeni.
Mm-hmm.
And they were loosely associated. Like
Yeah.
Zola Tango only knew the hotel receptionist person.
Okay.
And the hotel receptionist person, I'm sorry, I don't want to say their names wrong anymore. He knew Kwabe, but he didn't know Mingeni.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's very strange.
it's just not like
then.
they were a gang that was working together.
Right. And it's not like Zola is going to arrange to have his own car carjacked.
Right.
So that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it
But the fact that the car was left there was strange too, because a lot of people said, like, well, normally in South Africa, that car would have been,
Right.
it would have been dismantled for parts.
yeah, you would think
or
so.
burned out. Well, that's the heartbreaking story of Anni Hindocha and Shrien Dewani. I wanted to mention a few sources. I didn't have time to read the entire books, but I read part of a book called Bitter Dawn, The Truth About the Murder of Anni Dewani, and the book by Vinod, Anni Dewani, A Father's Story. I also watched a really good documentary from HBO called Anni, the Honeymoon Murder. It's 4 parts, and I thought it was really well done. So do you want to thank all of our kind listeners for their birthday wishes? A lot of people wished you a happy birthday.
It is so nice. I appreciate it so much. It's just, yeah, it's heartwarming for me when people reach out and stuff like that. And it's, yeah.
It was a fun week too, because Spotify Wrapped came out, and just so grateful for everyone who supports us and listens to us and tagged us and showed us that they are truly, truly spending a lot of minutes listening to our podcast. Although I think some of them are during their sleep hours.
Well, I had to do the math on a couple that you shared with me. I was like, that's many, many hours.
That's a lot of hours.
Yes.
You're listening to us like all the episodes more than once, which is probably because you're sleeping through them. We'll take it.
Yeah,
The download is
that's
a
okay.
download is a download. So one more sad story about the cherry chip cake.
Oh, yeah.
I was really, really angry. I don't know if I've been that angry in a while because I'd ordered it a couple of weeks in advance
Yeah.
where it should have had time to get here. And I'm watching and looking at, the tracking. Sometimes people, like, they make the label, which makes
Yeah.
you think that, oh, it's been shipped, but
But
it
it hasn't
sat there
really
for at
been
least
shipped.
a week and they didn't ship it. And
man.
boy, and it didn't come in time for your birthday.
It sure didn't. You did make a
I-
very nice French silk pie, though, and I appreciated
It
that.
was all right. But I had made the frosting, and that's, because I was
Yeah.
like ready. I'd made the cake crumbs that I like to put between the layers,
Yeah,
and that didn't come either. But
unacceptable.
yeah, I'm ready for next year, though. We're going to nail it next year.
We sure are.
One more thing I wanted to mention before we go. In the news this week, there was a story. Travis Kelce, I think, during his podcast, was interviewing George Clooney, and they were talking about marriage. George Clooney has been married to his lovely wife, Amal, for, I think, 10 years or so.
Hmm.
And Travis Kelce has been with Taylor for 2.5 years-ish.
Right.
They were talking about how they don't fight. And people
Both
had
George Clooney
both of
and-
them.
really?
Yeah. And George Clooney, George Clooney was like, what do I have to fight about? My wife and I agree on most things.
Wow.
And,
I
we
don't
have-
believe it.
we have money. And then Travis Kelce said, yeah, Taylor and I have never had a fight either. And people online were saying, you don't have a real relationship then. I don't believe it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
I'm curious what your take is on that.
I kind of agree with people online. Like, if you have truly been together for 2 years and you haven't had a fight, that's not a good sign.
That's interesting. Why do you think that?
Because you're going to disagree about things, and you can fight in a way that's respectful and,
Mhm.
mature, but you're going to have, I just can't believe it.
That's funny because I disagree with you.
Really?
And I'm going to have a fight with you, I guess. We really don't fight.
But we have, and we did in the first,
We've been together for a long time.
right, but we have fought.
I don't think we fought very much in the beginning at all. No,
Well,
I guess
not
we did
in the
fight.
first year, but
I guess we don't
maybe-
fight as much now as we did then.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little more fiery. I think you've worn me down. I'm a shadow of the woman I used to be, which I'm grateful for the most part. But in George Clooney's situation and, Travis and Taylor, like, what do you fight about when you have billions of dollars? Like,
Yeah, but I think it's because not all fights are about money. I would think that all of those people, except maybe Amal, I don't really know that much about her, but all of those people have pretty big egos. And I think when you have a big ego,
look who's talking.
I think when you have a big ego, you're likely to get into fights about things because you're like, I'm always right about things. Like, I just, I'm not talking about myself. I'm
Who do
talking,
you think has a bigger ego, Rich or Tina?
I probably me.
No comment. I forgot to ask you one important question regarding the case.
Okay.
So Shrien claimed that he was forced out of the back of the taxi at gunpoint and left Anni behind. What would you do in that
Oh,
situation?
don't ask me that.
I know what you would do, but I'm curious what you would say you would do.
I would jump in front of that gun and wrestle it away from the person and say, "You are not taking my wife."
And that's where we will leave this discussion. Again, thank you to Natasha for recommending this case. The popcorn,
That was really good.
it's delicious.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to make popcorn like this every time, but I've been munching on it during the show. It's really good.
Yeah.
So again, it's just like put just a few spices in there, like heavy on the smoked paprika, salt, sugar, a little cayenne pepper, and garlic powder. And I think it
Yeah,
was great.
yummy.
So you are going to put a link to our merch store in the show notes.
I will do that.
Please don't feel obligated. A lot of people have asked throughout the year, do you guys have merch? And I've said no, and this whole time we actually did.
I don't know who wouldn't be thrilled on Christmas morning to open up a Love, Marry, Kill hoodie.
Well, it won't get here on time for Christmas, so
Okay.
nice
Well,
try.
New Year's gift, whatever.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate, review, follow, and subscribe. Find us on social media or send us an email at lovemarriedkill.com. Forgot our
Forgot
email
that email
address.
for a minute.
And find us on YouTube.
Yeah.
One of these days, when I search for Love, Marry, Kill the podcast is going to come before the movie called Love, Marry, Kill.
We can hope. Consider supporting us on patreon.com/lovemarrykill. We have one tier, $5 a month, and you get early ad-free access plus a monthly bonus episode.
And our eternal gratitude.
Yes, that too.
Until next time.
Don't kill your wife.
And don't kill your husband.